JD Vance is finding out that what goes around comes around. Hello everybody, David Shuster here. A day after denigrating and insulting Ukrainian President Zelensky, JD Vance tried to go on a previously announced ski vacation in Vermont. It did not go very well for him. He was greeted with this.
There's some new video now we have showing the vice president being greeted by protesters holding anti-Vance, pro-Ukraine signs as he makes his way there to Vermont for a ski resort vacation. More protesters met the Vance family outside of the resort, and the family ultimately had to move to an undisclosed location.
That's right. The Vance family fled the luxury Sugar Bush ski resort. On the roads and outside the entrance, there were signs that read, "Go ski in Russia, traitor. Vance is the scum of the earth. Hate does not grow in the rocky soil of Vermont. And our cows shit better ideas than Vance." There were even demonstrators waiting at the main lift line. "Vance is a traitor. Go ski in Russia."
This is a group of people who has always been supportive of standing with Ukraine. However, I think yesterday's performance at the White House has probably galvanized even more people to come out today.
After what he did yesterday, he crossed the line.
I feel like all of America should be out here protesting.
By now, you've all seen clips of Donald Trump and JD Vance ambushing Ukrainian President Zelensky in the White House Oval Office. MSNBC's Morning Joe aired some of the clips and sent them to images of war-torn Ukraine. It was powerful and it was searing, and it underscores just how shameful the actions of Trump and Vance really were.
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people, you bring them on a propaganda tour.
You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards.
Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if you do you own a suit?
Yeah, problem.
That last image, of course, was Elon Musk when he was in the Oval Office. The self-proclaimed journalist who asked Zelensky about his clothes is Brian Glenn from Real America's Voice Network. It is conservative. Glenn is the boyfriend of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia. Glenn has never asked Elon Musk about wearing a baseball cap and a t-shirt in the Oval Office. And by the way, the reason Glenn and his right-wing organization were in the Oval Office to begin with for these photo ops is because the Trump White House has banned the Associated Press and Reuters wire service organizations. The wires refused to call the Gulf of Mexico by Trump's preferred name, Gulf of America. So the Trump White House has excluded the wires from the Oval Office, making room for One America News and for TASS. That's right. For the Zelensky meeting, the Russian propaganda organization TASS was invited into the Oval Office at the same time the U.S. wire service organizations were being excluded. Are Donald Trump and JD Vance Russian agents or Russian assets? Well, at this point, it doesn't really matter because they are certainly behaving like Russia's men. Here is U.S.-Russian expert Alexander Vindman.
Because this was clearly an ambush. This was JD Vance writing a false narrative about who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. Zelensky had just shown pictures of soldiers that were abused, talked about 20,000 kids being kidnapped, and JD Vance decides to pick this fight. He claims that, Putin's not the bad guy. Zelensky's just coming off the fact that just 2 days before, Trump called him a dictator. He came in there cool. Everything was really nice, copacetic, until that moment where JD Vance decided to blow it up. That was a big boy table. He wasn't ready for that conversation. He was, first of all, ignorant, maximally ignorant, and frankly, maximally destructive.
And Vance's destruction clearly seems to have broken through with much of the American public. Over the weekend, there were countless columns condemning Vance, countless interviews with ordinary Americans saying that Vance undermine democracy and freedom in order to impress Donald Trump and help Trump lick the boots of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. In Vermont, the anger was so intense that some demonstrators spent the weekend staking out the lift lines and the slopes on Sugar Bush just for a brief opportunity to try and yell at JD Vance. For much of the weekend, Vance and his family stayed hidden in their undisclosed location. But then, the Vances finally emerged to try and do some skiing on Sugar Bush. A photographer with TMZ was waiting near the Heaven's Gate ski lift and captured Vance in the green and black jacket getting taunted.
JD, how does it feel being Putin's puppet?
At another point, TMZ recorded Vance and his family skiing down. A snowboarder nearly slammed into Vance. Another snowboarder caused two skiers near Vance to collide. Did Vance stop to try and help the down skiers or ask if they were okay? Of course not. JD Vance kept going because JD Vance is an asshole. See, on top of promoting the interests of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and turning his back on American values of freedom and democracy, JD Vance is a jerk. It was obvious the moment he insisted that Zelensky should be more thankful for American support, even though Vance himself voted against any support for Ukraine. And now it's obvious away from the White House and on the snow-covered mountains of Vermont. Even while skiing, JD Vance seems incapable of basic decency, honesty, and civility. The protesters were correct. Vance is selfish, corrupt, and cares only about himself. Kudos to all the protesters and even a few snowboarders who told Vance to go ski in Russia. By the way, Donald Trump keeps getting shredded by Canadian citizens, Canadian leaders, and now the coach of a Canadian national soccer team.
If I have one message to our president, it's lay off the ridiculous rhetoric about Canada being the 51st state. As an American, I'm ashamed, right, of the arrogance and disregard that we've shown one of our historically oldest, strongest, and most loyal allies.
Trump regime and this cultism that I do get a little worried about if it starts to spread. And I feel for Americans. I mean, I can go home and I'm going to go home and I'm going to help fight this trade war. But I worry about folks who are watching this increasing authoritarianism kick in almost every bloody night. The last 30 days have started to feel like 30 years.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular is from Keyboard Kid, who wrote, "As a proud Canadian, after 10 years, I am thrilled to report that I sold my Florida home and will never set foot or spend a penny in the USA again." I hear you. I look forward to reading your comments about protesters giving JD Vance a memorable ski vacation in Vermont. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.